Good evening and welcome to the briefing room. I'm Madhavdas G. Ladies and gentlemen, high in the Himalayas, thousands of meters above sea level, a disaster has unleashed unimaginable destruction across Nepal and Tibet. Tonight, an entire Himalayan set of settlements that lie buried under mud and debris. Families are desperately searching for their loved ones and hundreds remain unaccounted for after a catastrophe that descended from the mountains with almost no warning. The scale of the devastation is heartbreaking. People running for their lives, buildings swallowed in just seconds, bridges that have been ripped apart, cars, buses that have been tossed around like toys. There's a raging mass of water, ice, mud and boulders that's tearing through everything in its path. Now, Nepal's official death toll has crossed 350 and global agencies estimate close to 1,000 people missing across Nepal and Tibet combined, including hundreds of foreign nationals who are still unaccounted for. This is a cross-border Himalayan catastrophe of a staggering scale, leaving entire communities fighting just to survive. Now, this is how the disaster unfolded with little warning and extraordinary speed. The flash flood struck Rasuwa along Nepal's northern border with Tibet. The Bhotakoshi and the tributary, which is the Lende, Kola, became the main channels of the surge. Crucially, there was little local rainfall as far as this entire area is concerned. At 8:37 a.m., a magnitude 4.4 earthquake struck near the Nepal-Tibet border. But the US Geological Survey has ruled it out as the cause. The likely trigger? An ice rock avalanche or sudden river outburst. Ice, snow and rock cascading down the Himalayan slopes, blocking the Lende Kosa and creating a temporary natural dam. As water and debris accumulated, the blockage eventually failed, unleashing a sudden flood that surged down the hills further downstream. By 9 a.m., the surge was racing through the valley, washing away bridges, damaging roads and hitting hydropower infrastructure. The Trishuli River rose by 9 meters in just 30 minutes. Rasuwa, Nuwakot and Dhading were hit, while the disaster also crossed into Tibet, impacting the Girong port. In short, complete glacier collapse, river blockage, dam failure and a devastating wall of water. Viewers, Times now happens to be the only channel on ground that's bringing you the concrete coverage of Nepal's catastrophe. Take a look at the ground report from my colleague Kritika.
Currently also we've just ventured a little ahead and come to the Trishuli market area, where yesterday we had seen that catastrophic flood in fact take over this entire market space. I'd like to show you visuals about how just doors are left. We can only see support pillars and doors attached to them. The entire buildings, the markets, the office spaces, all of them have now been engulfed by the flood that rushed over here. On your screens is also the Agricultural Development Bank, which of course is in tethers right now. You can also see the scale of the volume of the sludge as well that came down along with the floods. The ATM building, just even till 7 feet height, it is already at such an elevated spot, but till about 7 feet height of it is all the sludge debris that we can currently see. The river, the Trishuli River continues to flow as well. A grim reminder of in fact what all went on yesterday. We can also see how electric poles have been toppled over all along the साइड. यहाँ पर आप बताइए परसों तक क्या क्या देखने को यहाँ मिल रहा था? यहाँ पर अभी जैसे ये सब सिर्फ फ्लैट हो गया है, इसमें सिर्फ मलबा दिख रहा है मुझे.
ये तो पूरा बाजार था, यहाँ चहल पहल बहुत है, आदमी बहुत आते थे जाते थे, खाने के लिए होटल,
खाने की मार्केट, होटल सब कुछ था.
कुछ था, पेट्रोल पंप था, यहाँ पर 2 पोल थे, एक वो आगे पुल था, एक नीचा पुल था, उसके बाद बहुत बड़ा अच्छा मार्केट था. इस पास
2 ब्रिज भी थे आपके?
दो ब्रिज था वहाँ पर.
दोनों ब्रिज अभी बह गए,
वो उड़ा दिया. यहाँ पर कुछ भी बाकी नहीं है अब बाकी तो कुछ भी नहीं है यहाँ पर बाकी रह गया.
जो लोग यहाँ रहते थे वो अभी कहाँ पर शेल्टर ले रहे हैं, वो किधर गए हैं?
बहुत पानी में ले गया इसको, बहुत आदमी का पता ही नहीं कितना लोग ले गए यहाँ से. जो बाकी है ऊपर जा करके बाजार में आर्मी बैरक में भी है और गवर्नमेंट में उसको गवर्नमेंट कैंप में भी है.
Now, unfortunately, when it comes to Nepal, floods have repeatedly ravaged the hilly nation. Let's remind you about Nepal's tragic history. In October 2021, eastern and far western areas were impacted. The deaths were 60 in this case. From the 2nd to the 6th of September in 2021, The Bagmati, Lumbini and Gandaki provinces were impacted. Deaths were 13. From the 20th to 30th of August in 2021, multiple districts were impacted with 11 deaths. In June of 2022, again, there were multiple districts impacted, 21 deaths in this situation as well, unfortunately. In September of 2022, in the Acham region, the deaths here were 22. In September 2024, Kathmandu Valley and other areas of Nepal impacted, over 66 deaths that have taken place here. So why is it that Nepal is repeatedly struck by floods, and could they have been warned earlier? Before we get into the warnings that never came, let's tell you why Nepal has had a troubled history with natural disasters. One, the active tectonic plate collision zone that Nepal sits on. It's directly on the boundary where the Indian tectonic plate collides with the Eurasian plate. Indian and Eurasian plates crash about 4 to 5 centimeters annually, locking the strain that is deep underground. When that pressure snaps, catastrophic earthquakes hit. The second reason, there's a steep, fragile Himalayan topography that exists over here. What does this mean? That the extreme elevation jumps over just short distances, creating unstable slopes, making mountainsides highly prone to massive landslides from rain or quakes. Reason number 3, torrential monsoon and rain that downpours in this entire region. During the summer season and as well as the monsoon season, that is of course June to September, monsoon winds slam into the Himalayan walls, unleashing heavy cloudbursts that saturate the soil and trigger rapid, violent surface runoffs. Number 4, there are rapidly melting glaciers and lakes. The rising temperature, global warming, all of that melting glaciers into unstable high-altitude lakes. Ice avalanches, in this case, huge chunks of them falling down, or the rain, in fact, that end up breaching the fragile moraine dams, unleashing the destructive glacial lake outburst floods. There's also the fast-flowing narrow river gorges that Nepal's major rivers travel through. They are steep and there are narrow mountain valleys. Rivers are trapped in these narrow valleys, and the bottleneck and the excess water transforms the runoff into high-velocity walls of mud and debris. There's also unplanned mountain development infrastructure, unregulated hillside roads, riverbed encroachments, hydropower tunneling that has destroyed the slope stability as well as amplified the flash flood destruction. Now, Times Now has been very closely monitoring the rescue and relief efforts in Nepal. Take a look at what we found in Nepal's Chitwan.
You can see in the visual is the Narayani River, which is coming right from the Raswa, where the flood has struck and a tragedy has taken place in Nepal. The Nepal officials have confirmed that around 168 people so far have lost their life. You can see the kind of pressure with the flow. This particular river is flowing towards the downside of the Nepal. It is being said that around 1,000 people so far, they are said to be missing. The Nepali army has been deployed by the government, and what we are given to understand is that 168 people have lost their life. जो रसुआ में हुआ उसका कुछ असर यहाँ पे देखने को मिला?
रसिया में जो हुआ उसका असर तो लाश ही दिख रहा था, इधर ही कैप्चर हुआ। बहुत सारे इधर से उससे ज्यादा उधर का जो पार्ट है ना, उधर बह गया ज्यादा। तकरीबन 30 लोग लाश मिले हैं इधर।
Now the rescue operation is on. India has also sent the humanitarian aid to Nepal, and everyone is praying for the safety of the people, those who are still trapped at these affected areas.
Let's also tell you about the Ministry of External Affairs and what it has said officially regarding the Nepal flood tragedy. A total of 288 Indians who still remain unaccounted for. 73 Indians working at the Trishuli 1 project who are now reported missing. 21 Indians from Tamil Nadu have been rescued. They were headed to Kailash Mansarovar. 200 Indians in Tibet have sought India's assistance for their rescue. India stands with Nepal and is ready for all aid. Let's listen in to what the MEA spokesperson Radhir Jaiswal mentioned earlier today.
1300 hours today, we have been able to rescue 21 Indian nationals. These 21 group of 21 people are from Tamil Nadu, and we are making available their names on our X handle, so you can get the details. Our embassy, our ambassador has spoken to people in the group and have assured all possible help. They are coming to Kathmandu, hopefully, and then arrangements will be made for their travel back home.
And for the first time since this incident, Times Now has been able to establish contact with stranded Indian nationals who've been rescued in Nepal. This report is coming to you, in fact, from the Trishuli military camp. Watch this.
Around 8:30, 8:45 morning. In a matter of 15 minutes, everything was wiped away.
We saw some blast, something blast sound. Suddenly got the water rate adjacent, the river was running, going very forcefully. It was started going.
All the debris, everything.
The debris, everything. Not debris, only water force, with depression.
Mud blowing, like that, no? And a bomb blasting, like, and smoke, black smoke came.
Now, geopolitical experts are citing Chinese actions behind the trail of devastation caused as far as the floods in Nepal are concerned. Let's tell you what really they are talking about. The first red flag is that the flood amplified by Chinese hydrological modifications. The second, Chinese infrastructure footprint in Tibet has amplified the flood, which is what many talk about. The third, China's actions contributed to the severity of the disaster. Red flag number 4, Beijing didn't send an emergency notification to Nepal. Number 5, no warnings on water level spikes or debris formation. These are some of the pointers that have been noted by several experts, including Dr. Brahmacharani, who is a geopolitical expert. Let's also tell you really what the Nepalese media and the Chinese side have been saying, because they're at loggerheads regarding who was at fault and who was responsible for the floods. And could this devastation at the end of the day have been averted? The Nepali media says that the warning perhaps came too late. The Chinese side says that there is no failure as far as warnings are concerned. Now, clearly, of course, the Nepali media is also saying that was the upstream data withheld from Nepal. The question that they are asking, the Chinese side says that the disaster was sudden. Nepalese media also asking whether the trigger was on China's side. China says the trigger was on Nepal's side of the border. Nepali media has asked whether precious hours were lost that could have been helped in preventing this tragedy or its magnitude in any event. Chinese side says that both sides were hit together. Nepalese media has asked that China must release the data. Chinese side says that cooperation has saved lives and will save lives, is what they say. Now remember that pilgrims headed to Mount Kailash and Lake Mansarovar usually travel at this time of the year. But unfortunately this time, several of those pilgrims were caught in this particular landslide and the deluge. The emotional Sadhguru, who has also revealed how he has still not been able to get in touch with the pilgrims who were headed back to India after the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, has spoken. Listen in.
One of our groups the S3 group that we met at Saga, and also met them that when we were trekking up, they were coming down.
Let's quickly take this across to our panelists. Joining us, Basanta Raj Adhikari is disaster risk reduction expert. With us is KJ Ramesh, ex-DG of IMD. Pathikrit Pen, strategic affairs expert, is with us. We also have Hari Ojha, who's a Nepali community leader. Let me start with you first. Hari Ojha, where is this sense of distrust, the sense of, of somewhere or the other Nepal not having been informed coming from? Have we seen China, for instance, behave differently in past disasters? And what is causing this kind of fear or apprehension within the minds of people of Nepal? Hari Ojha, can you hear me?
Definitely the plot that came, it was not stoppable, but it would be preventable, and the death that we have seen on Nepal side would have, the number would have been low, because right on 8:45 when the first incident happened. After 15 minutes on 9 a.m. there was still 15 minutes. If we got the real-time data saying that okay, it happened there, many people would have been rescued. And we were. It was not like main information, like actual information, but we heard from long ago that this would be happen sometime, because it was really on risk zone before. And that day also, if Nepal and China would have real-time data sharing, this would have been preventable.
Mr. KJ Ramesh, do you think the time was enough for accurate data representation to be given? China is a leader in technology. It has, of course, a huge presence of dams in the region, over 100, I was reading according to some reports. It would obviously have the seismological sensors, the necessary technology, the satellite technology, etc., to be able to provide a warning. The question is, were those 40 minutes adequate, and why did that not happen?
The thing is, information is there, networks are working, observational networks are working, but real-time analysis of developing risk, increasing risk in the region has not been assessed using all the information. Had it been so, they would have shared the information, and then preventive action, anticipatory action could have been taken. So that is what is missing. We have only sensors. We don't have the system of using all that information with antecedent factors of earthquake prone region, mild earthquakes happening every day, and saturation of the slopes, and antecedent rainfall that has been happening. By taking all these factors, if developing risk profile has been assessed, at least 12 hours frequency, at least now that should start happening, then this kind of emergency catastrophe without sharing the information can be avoided in future.
All right, and let me take this question also to Mr. Basant Adhikari. Mr. Basant Adhikari, you've heard what the previous speaker was saying, and he is saying that there is no real-time analysis. Therefore, perhaps the time was short. At the same time, China is completely calling fake news any kind of insinuation. And the Chinese embassy in Nepal, you would have seen what they posted on social media. They say it's fake to say that China didn't issue an early warning to Nepali side. They say there was an earthquake-like glacier collapse that occurred on the Nepali side, and that has triggered huge mudslides, which itself has caused significant casualties and left people missing on both the Nepali and Chinese sides of the Girong-Rasuwa-Gadi border region. What does one make of this?
I think I believe that the information shared by Chinese embassy is correct, because the ice avalanche was occurred from the Nepalese side, but it blocked the river, which is in border between Nepal and China. So avalanche caused from the northern slope of Nepalese mountain, but the destruction was so enormous towards Rasuwa, which is the border town. And I would like to express here, this is an unprecedented event, and none of the countries in the world is prepared to rescue or to predict, because in the Himalayas it's so complex, you cannot really monitor all the glaciers and glacial lake outburst flood. If you see the recent events, even small lakes were breached. So that's why we are in the very risks in the verge of climate change, triggering lots of devastation or the hazards in this part of the globe. So that's why it is not a matter of which country did what, why Nepal couldn't do or other countries couldn't do. It's all about the common fate of the Himalayan landscape.
All right. And Pathikrit Ben, do you agree with that? That perhaps the Himalayas are just so vast, proper network to try and analyze this would be very, very challenging. But at the same time, the larger question is that just as China has been doing in Tibet, building dam after dam, we're also seeing similar things happening in other areas bordering the northeast. In fact, one of the projects India is very concerned about, connected to the Brahmaputra, because many say that this kind of a disaster could happen if those dams are built, which could spill huge, colossal amounts of water downstream into India in different parts, similar to what has happened in Nepal, perhaps.
Madhav, we cannot just blame climate change all the time for everything that's happening, because if you look at what's happening on the Chinese side, there are a large number of resource extraction projects in indiscriminate, mining of copper, zinc, iron, gold going on. There are massive projects, not just for hydropower dam construction. They're trying to divert or completely reorient the routes of the rivers. The rivers always will flow from north to south. You just cannot change it. And there are attempts being done. And there are massive infrastructure corridors coming up. And all of this requires huge amount of use of dynamites for blasting the mountains. And when you do this kind of activities in a region which is already seismically very, very sensitive, you would invariably have some kind of catastrophe, because the glacial lakes are the biggest reason for these kind of flash floods which happen there. So you might say that China may not have been able to give it, say, 5 years before it, but whatever activities were happening there, there were telltale signs that something like this would have happened. The other important thing is this, the question mark that comes is that now China comes out and says that in the next 3 days there's another warning because of the barrier lake, which already has 2 million cubic meters of water, and another 3 million cubic meters is coming. Now, if they can give this information now, I mean, is it that they had no clue about what was happening probably yesterday? So there are question marks. It will be easy to blame anybody. I'm not going to get into that. But one problem that China has with most of the countries is that they do not share hydrological data, neither with India nor with Nepal. So in an area which is geologically extremely sensitive, which is Tibet, because of the mountains, the kind of devastation they do because of blasts and dynamite blasts for all these construction activities, invariably some or the other day would have happened. Now, I am not trying to blame anybody, but Nepal, we have to give it to them that they tried their best. But disaster response mechanism is not something easy, which you cannot build it in a day or two, but that's something they have to build. Look at the course of the river and the construction right on the river bed. This was disaster in the making. If the habitations were probably even 200 meters away, most of people would have been saved. And unfortunately, the kind of sludge, the kind of sediments, the kind of debris that has come all along with the flood, it will take months, perhaps years for Nepal to recover. And for a country like Nepal, it's not easy. But that is something China must understand, that, it's shared growth. It's not just about I do whatever I want. The same thing is going to happen, or probably there's a chance in Northeast. But I think in case of India, I think our own satellite imagery gives a better understanding, early warning, because we have our own constellation of satellites. So, but yes, the threats do remain. Back to you.
All right, Hari Oja, is that a valid concern that even developments, and of course China sharing this real-time data is very important, that should happen, but even the settlements, and we've seen this here in India, in Kedarnath, in Chaboli, those settlements which are right next to the river bank are the most impacted. Perhaps it's high time for us to also respect the possibility of a huge overflow as far as these rivers are concerned, to ensure that our property, to ensure that those who are inhabiting these areas are at least at a safe distance from the rivers, which could lead to such potential disasters in the future.
Definitely, yeah. I agree on those thoughts, and prevention is always better than cure. Right now, the government of Nepal, Balendra Shah, Prime Minister, he is also actively saying that, okay, we should not make a habitat nearby the river. In Kathmandu, I think he has already removed the people, the houses from there, and in the long run, this was also a plan. In his end, he is trying to do the prevention things, but as far you said, the satellite image, those things, and the second time they are saying, okay, now there is a warning. China would have really helped setting the information, which would have saved a lot of lives.
All right, and I must ask this question also, of our panelists as well. I mean, one very, very important question that remains, Mr. Adhikari, is this: that yes, Nepal also has these vulnerabilities. Why does Nepal not have an adequate early warning system in place to prevent such things from happening, given the sheer number of incidents that we've seen happen in Nepal over the recent years?
Thanks for raising this very important question. We are very good on flood early warning for the annual river flood, but not these unprecedented events. We are monitoring glacial lakes because that are our major concern. But detaching the avalanche like this is very, very difficult, because we don't have the clear information about the risk hotspots in the Himalayas. And our previous colleague explained that we didn't have our own satellites, so we don't have very clear information, and we don't have ground monitoring stations above 3,000 meters. So that's why getting information in the highland is really difficult. So that's why we were not able to establish our early warning system for these mountains. And for the transboundary information, yes, of course, we need to have a very well-established information sharing system. I think government of Nepal is really trying to work with its neighboring countries, India and China, to establish the network. So that is the next step that government of Nepal should do to save the life by understanding these potential hazardous events in the future.
Right. And Mr. KJ Ramesh, what do you think the lessons are for India when an episode like this takes place?
I think now we should establish a multi-country task team to monitor continuously all the vulnerabilities, increasing the zones of risk for this kind of catastrophes. Jointly between China, India and Nepal, Bhutan. All these 4 countries have to join together and establish this platform, monitoring platform, 24/7 weather and climate risk surveillance mechanism, and this should become part of our BRICS summit agenda, so that this kind of things can be minimized. Impacts from these kind of catastrophes can be minimized in future, because everybody in all the 3 countries will get, 4 countries will get affected. I think that should happen.
All right, idealistic, but is it practical, Pathikrit Pain? Can we push this through in BRICS? Can we actually have real-time sharing of data? Nepal, India, China, perhaps all countries need to share that data?
If it becomes a...
Madhav, we have to keep trying that, but you're right, it's easier said than done. But I'll just give one example. One of the most disaster-prone states of India is Odisha. In 1998-99, there was a cyclone which ended up killing more than 10,000 people. 2-3 years back, a similar kind of cyclone, the total casualty was less than 10. So look at what India has done in terms of development of the disaster response force mechanism. There's a disaster management authority separately at the national scale. There are national disaster response force which are battalion level. So I think one thing is important. See, what China has done and what is doing, it's a grave harm. There's no doubt about it. But I think Nepal has to acknowledge that it is a country which is prone to disasters, and it has to have that kind of facilities in place. For example, if you look at the rivers have not been dredged for years, for decades, for centuries perhaps. Now that's why their ability to carry water even when there's a flash flood is very limited, and then they can't expand because the banks have all been encroached upon. So dredging of river is something which is very important. In case of India, the river linking project, one of the reasons that India is going for river linking project is to actually minimize the chances of massive floods. It doesn't mean that India doesn't have these threats, but I would always acknowledge that it is easier to predict a cyclone than to predict a flash flood, especially because of glacial lakes and when it's across the border. See, China has to understand that if other countries get devastated, their growth will also get limited. So there is an issue, but whether it will actually translate into China getting ready, if you look at the kind of sensor they've done on information flow in Tibet and the whole of China, that indicates that there is something fundamentally wrong that happened, and now they're realizing it. Whether they will take corrective measures or not, we don't know, but we have to keep on piling pressures on them. Back to you.
Vasant Adhikari, what would you like to say about that? Because serious questions are there, given the fact that Nepal has been at the receiving end of nature's fury for quite some time. Perhaps some concrete measures, dredging of rivers, all of that, could have taken place. And what are you hearing about the actual numbers? Because we are told over 1,000 people are missing. Could the numbers, could the casualties be north of that even?
Okay, let me address in 2 ways. So the first one, I agree that we need to have a river dredging, and we are stressing or pressing to the government that we should follow the risk-sensitive land use zoning for the better settlement planning. So this is the first step. And the second, death toll, I don't know about that because as per the situation, the death toll might increase 1,000 or 1,500. We don't know yet because our government is really working on this. So it might take 1 week, 10 days or for a month.
All right. And what are you hearing about how soon you will get to the upper reaches? Have all areas, that there is a Trishuli medical camp, the military camp where, there are all sorts of facilities that have been established. How far north have the authorities been able to reach?
So it is difficult for now because all the roads were washed away. So only possible the airborne or by the helicopters. But I'm sure that by tomorrow, the Nepalese authority will go with some rescue and relief material to the border town.
Absolutely. I'm sure the emphasis obviously is on relief and rehabilitation to ensure that lives are saved, to ensure that those who are there get some amount of medical as well as, relief in terms of food and other basic necessities. But particularly one of the factors of concern for India would be that, there are huge number of Indians who are across the border for the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. And while India has mentioned that there are over 200 such individuals, there's no clarity on how they're going to come back, when they're going to come back. And that would be a concern for the government as to how to handle all of this diplomatically at a time when the entire terrain has been seriously impacted.
Madhav, I feel very sad and sorry to say this, but in this kind of an incident, what happened, the kind of flash floods, it is extremely difficult to even, quantify the number of people who would have eventually died, because it's very difficult to even find dead bodies. You just cannot get it. In many places, look at the kind of debris that is coming, the kind of, rocks that are coming, bodies get smashed, bodies get cut into pieces. So I think the government of India is doing its best to help Nepal and to actually track and identify the missing Indians. But to presume that, they would have 100% success, well, we have to give it to the authorities in spite of their best intentions. I'm sorry, but this kind of an incident, when that happens, it will be very, very difficult to actually identify them. If they are saved somewhere, well, God bless them. We will pray for that. However, this kind of incident, when it happens, you have seen what happened in Wayanad, or when the thing that happened in Kedarnath, probably it takes years to even identify the bodies.
Right.
They just cannot get it. So it is a very, very bad situation, and we have shared destiny together. So we have to stand with Nepal. For whatever happens there, it always would have an impact downstream in India as well. So we are a downstream country.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. Mr. Basant Raj, as well as, of course, Patikrit Pain. Also, of course, joining us on the show, Mr. KJ Ramesh, as well as Hari Oja. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening.